In the icy waters of the Antarctic Ocean, a group of 28 people was on a ship, but it became stuck in a sea of millions of tons of ice. After 6 months had gone by, one night they suddenly heard a loud sound coming from below the ship, and simultaneously, the ship began to lean to one side. It felt as if someone had tried to push the ship forcefully from below. What transpired next was beyond their wildest dreams. In the Antarctic Ocean, waves reach heights comparable to buildings, with winds reaching 100 km/h and water temperatures so low that human blood starts to freeze. Traveling in this ocean feels like inviting death itself. Because of the cold and the waves, even if they managed to survive, icebergs as large as mountains could easily crush the ship. However, a century ago, technology was not as advanced. In this dreadful ocean, a group of 28 individuals became stranded in their ship. Under the vast open sky, they did not spend just a few weeks or months, but shockingly spent a total of 2 years. As far as one could see, there was only snow, fierce winds, a deficiency of food and drink, with no possibility of summoning help. This is a survival narrative that has been referred to as the greatest survival story ever told. The main character in this tale is Sir Ernest Shackleton, an explorer whose goal was to push the limits of human endurance. And for this purpose, he chose to name his ship Endurance. He completed several dangerous missions in his lifetime. In 1901, he was involved in a mission to reach Antarctica, but had to retreat from over 750 kilometers away. In 1907, he tried once more to reach this goal. They took on this mission but turned back only 150 kilometers from the finish line. And now, in the year 1914, their plan was not only to reach Antarctica, but also to traverse this continent on foot. The only reason was that Sir Ernest Shackleton wished to accomplish what no one had ever done before. This mission was titled the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, and because of its perilous nature, no one was eager to participate. Ernest's first challenge was to recruit a crew for his expedition. Therefore, he wrote an advertisement and got it published in the Times newspaper. Keep in mind that this was not an ordinary tour operator's advertisement. The opening words were, "Men wanted for a dangerous journey." It clearly indicated that the compensation would be quite low. It will be known that winter will be faced and one will have to remain in darkness for many months. At every moment, one will have to play with dangers and there is no certainty of a safe return. Sir Ernest sought to attract individuals who are fearless in the face of danger. Before long, he recruited a crew of 27 individuals who were fearless in the face of danger. Sir Ernest had meticulously planned this mission for 4 years, but as the date approached, the vision of their expedition started to blur. As World War I had already started globally, everyone thought that perhaps the expedition would be cancelled, but Britain, which had also declared war, granted permission for the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. A strong ship was needed. However, this was no ordinary vessel that could be constructed with ease. Fortunately, such a ship was already present in the Arctic for sailing. A Norwegian company had built this ship for another explorer, who wanted to take the elite class of that time on a polar bear hunting expedition through this ship. But his business model flopped. Sir Ernest bought this ship and named it Endurance. Endurance was specially built with thick American oak wood, and the design was such that the wood could withstand tremendous pressure. It was a kind of hybrid ship that had sails and an engine as well. Finally, the day arrived that Sir Ernest had been waiting for many years. On August 8, 1914, Endurance began its journey from the city of Plymouth, England. For the next 4 months, it continued its voyage in the Atlantic Ocean. First, they went to Argentina. Subsequently, they proceeded to South Georgia Island from there, and after finalizing the preparations on that island, they directed the ship on December 5, 1914, toward the Weddell Sea located in the Antarctic Ocean. The crew of the Endurance consisted of 28 people and 50 large dogs, who were meant to help drag equipment and supplies through the ice of Antarctica. The journey lasted 46 days, and they were now just 1 day from the coast of Antarctica. But on January 18, 1915, they encountered their first obstacle that hindered their progress. What happened was that the layers of ice over the Weddell Sea became thicker and thicker, and at one point, these layers reached a thickness of 18 feet. And now the Endurance did not have enough power to break through and move forward. In some places, the ice was so weak that they could start their journey on foot from there. They could walk from there. Not possible. Endurance got stuck in ice about 130 kilometers before Wassel Bay. At first, it appeared that this problem was due to RG, but in truth, it was the largest challenge faced during the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. It proved to be a problem. After many days of relentless attempts, they made the decision to manually push the 300-ton vessel ahead. For the next 2 days, they worked tirelessly to cut through the ice and create a path, but I was completely exhausted. However, this task was even more difficult than they had anticipated. After several days of hard work, they could only move the ship a mere 300 meters. It was stuck again. After a month of attempts to free the ship, Sir Ernest finally lost hope on February 14, 1915. He decided the ship could be left to drift with the natural movement of the ice. There is a chance that the ice will break on its own as winter arrives. At this time, the Endurance was acting like a winter station, with Kiryu occupied in his usual work. The only distinction was that the ship remained in one place now. Kiryu was very enthusiastic, and Sir Ernest had established a strict discipline aboard the ship. To stay occupied all day, they held discussions, slept and played. And they also spent time cooking, all while waiting for the day when the ice would crack and allow them to move either forward or backward. Days passed in endurance, and the crew became closer to each other. They even developed an emotional attachment to the animals. Everyone had hoped that they would eventually reach some civilization, but perhaps nature had different intentions. In April 1915, the ice began to break, but due to the increasing pressure, the layers of ice started to pile on top of each other, creating an extremely dangerous situation. This was an anticipated occurrence. The compressing ice, weighing millions of tons, started to apply pressure on the Endurance too. At this moment, it was vital that the ship, from the pressure of the ice, was cleared. Everyone worked together. After several weeks of effort, this crisis was averted, yet the threat remained imminent. On the night of July 14, 1915, a sudden loud noise came from below the ship and the Endurance tilted to one side. No one had any idea what had occurred. Was it a collision with the ice or something different? The night passed in a blur, but when dawn broke, what was revealed was beyond belief. Had not only tilted the ship to one side, but now the radar that assisted in turning the ship was utterly destroyed. The crew of the Endurance had been stranded here for a total of 6 months. They were situated at least 2,000 kilometers away from any human habitation. There was no communication with anyone, nor any expectation of help. Their only hope, if any, rested with Sir Ernest Shackleton. On the 18th of October 1915, the dreams of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition were completely destroyed. The crew had been stranded in the same spot for 9 months. Suddenly, one night, a wave of pressure struck, tilting the Endurance by 30 degrees in the blink of an eye. The ship was now in danger of leaking. The threat of leaks began to loom over them. Water started to seep in through cracks in some areas. All the crew members worked tirelessly through the night to ensure that no water entered the ship. No water got in. The roof support seemed to have only lasted until this point. On October 27, 1915, Sir Ernest Shackleton issued an order to abandon the ship because the only way to save lives was now this one method. Supplies were taken out, including food and animals. All lifeboards and bedding were taken out, and now the entire crew was forced to come out under the open sky on a blanket of snow. For several months, the ship that had been their support for months was now breaking apart under the pressure of the ice and slowly began to sink into the water. Now everyone had the same question in their minds. How long would they wait on the floating ice? Sir Ernest Shackleton concluded that remaining here was not safe. He was aware of an island called Paulet, located 500 kilometers away, where supplies used to be, where there used to be shelter and supplies. Getting here required more than just 3 lifeboats, as these lifeboats are insignificant compared to the ice capable of shattering such a massive vessel. Consequently, a decision was made to trek to this island. They set off towards Paulet Island, marking the start of their adventure. The most dangerous part was yet to come. For the next 6 months, the crew faced life-threatening dangers. The ice sheet they camped on either had holes or would either have holes or start floating away with the water's current. Fortunately, this ice sheet was slowly drifting towards Paulet Island. Thus, Sir Ernest made the decision to swim towards Paulet Island while remaining on the ice sheet. Kiryu had completely exhausted his food and water supplies. He tried to hunt whatever he could find on the floating ice sheet resembling an island, including penguins and seals. By February 1916, it had been 13 months since they embarked on their journey. Now, the condition was such that they were surviving on just one biscuit at a time, as if they were managing. The situation deteriorated so much while waiting for Pullet Island until next month that they even had to kill their dogs. Now, they have to manage for the next few days. The arrangements were made. They hoped that upon reaching Pullet Island, they would find some supplies, but the floating island they were on had its own. Changed direction and started heading towards Elephant Island instead of Pullet Island. For the next several days, there was a stormy scene at sea. The temperature dropped to -20 degrees, and several crew members began to suffer from frostbite. Their faces and tongues were so swollen that it was difficult to swallow anything. Before they knew it, April 1916 had arrived. By somehow managing with the broken sheet of ice, he reached April 1916. In the past 16 months, they were finally able to touch a piece of land for the first time. They breathed a sigh of relief on Elephant Island, but this island was completely barren, making it impossible to stay here for long, especially after the food supplies had run out. There was only one glimmer of hope, and that was South Georgia Island, located 1,300 kilometers away. Sir Ernest Shackleton decided that they would undertake a lifeboat mission to reach South Georgia Island. They would do this suicidal mission. Chose several crew members and departed from Elephant Island to South Georgia Island on April 24, 1916. This journey is known to be one of the most dangerous sea routes in the world. They had to confront waves that reached heights of 90 feet. The icy cold was so intense that every part of their bodies began to freeze. In the face of all these hardships, they were compelled to make this journey without GPS or a compass, relying exclusively on the stars and sunlight for navigation. Each day was a test of endurance. Despite putting in all their effort, they could not cover more than 80 kilometers of distance. Finally, after 16 long days, on the 10th of 1916, Sir Ernest Shackleton and 5 crew members reached South Georgia Island. They achieved success, but there was an issue here. They had arrived on the incorrect side of South Georgia Island. They saw 4,000 feet tall mountains ahead. Following a relentless ascent for 36 hours, they eventually arrived at the other side where the whaling station was situated. He was in such dire condition that the whaling station staff did not recognize Shackleton. Everyone was in disbelief that Sir Ernest, who had departed nearly 1.5 years earlier, had reached here in this condition. Following his time in Georgia, Sir Ernest embarked once more towards Elephant Island, where he had previously abandoned 22 individuals in a terrible state. Numerous failed attempts were made by him to arrive at the island. Ultimately, on the day of August 30th, 1916, he saw smoke coming from Elephant Island far away. It was smoke that had been set on fire as a signal. Sir Ernest had no idea how many of his crew members were still alive, but astonishingly, as he approached, he discovered that all the crew on Elephant Island were alive and safe, and in good health. On August 8, 1914, he left England for the first time. After 2 years and 22 days, he managed to return his whole team home safely. He returned them all home safely. Certainly, he never completed his original mission. Previously, he had made 2 failed attempts to reach the South Pole and the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, Antarctic Mission. They were stuck 120 kilometers ahead of schedule. Nevertheless, their remarkable survival story secured them a position that they likely could not have reached by just finishing the mission. After 107 years of this incident, in the year 2022, the Endurance was finally discovered in the Antarctic Ocean. The Endurance is still preserved in perfect condition on the ocean floor, 3,000 meters below, and even the name written on it can be read clearly. The name can still be read correctly.